welcome back to Room 237, and I have another Giallo review. But before I get to that, I have a few more things coming in, but this is just what I picked up this week. This is not a Giallo, and this is one I have reviewed before, but I've never owned it. It's Jess Franco's Bloody Moon, which is a slasher film. I also bought this, one for the collection, and two, because it's going to be part of a video I'll be making about the difference between slasher and Giallo, which this is a slasher, and also a collection video of movies that are often mislabeled or misinterpreted as a Giallo. This will be on both. And then I did pick up this Giallo, another Klaus Kinski film, Double Face. This is the Arrow release. I've heard really good things about this, so eager to check that out. But this is a video, or this is a movie that, so now I'm actually getting to the review. I watched this a few days ago, actually, and I've had some schedule changes, so my sleep schedule's kind of messed up, and I haven't really found time where I have like enough time and energy to do this. So bear with me on this because it's been a few days since I've seen it. But at the time of watching this, I was all caught up on my Giallo films. So I started dipping into Argento, and this is for his 1993 film, Trauma. This is not the cover of the DVD. This is just the insert because I actually like this cover more. So yeah, I actually had never seen this before, and yeah, at the time of watching this, I was caught up, so I thought, even though I was saving all Argento for like a mini marathon at the end, I decided why not check it out. And I found that this is amongst the harder films to find by Argento. I'd say this and Four Flies on Grey Velvet have been seemingly the hardest ones to get. Thankfully, I have both. The only film of his now that I don't own is Phantom of the Opera, but I have reviewed that. So this came out in 1993, and the thing about this is, I believe it was one of his first films that was directed in the United States. The first one being Two Evil Eyes, which I actually meant to do for Halloween because it is an anthology. But, okay, this was his first feature length in American production, following his collaboration with George Romero in Two Evil Eyes. If I'm not mistaken, I think Two Evil Eyes was sort of a way, because him and Romero have had a long friendship and a working relationship. He produced Dawn of the Dead. Two Evil Eyes was kind of an idea to get Argento to kind of dip his foot into like American production and to get him really, really get him shown to American audiences through a major release. Two Evil Eyes was not that well received, so I believe this was his first real solo foray into an American production, an American release. And I've heard some debate over, because, I think everyone agrees that from Bird with the Crystal Plumage up to the 90s is a pretty solid streak for Argento. And then it's not so much of a dip, it's more of a plummet as far as quality of his films. But even though Sleepless is really good, I've heard some debate over what Argento's the end of his streak is, and I've heard it's either Trauma or Stendhal Syndrome, which came out 3 years later. I still haven't seen Stendhal Syndrome. I have it. It's one I need to get to. But I thought Trauma was a very solid movie. I mean, you can definitely tell it's more of an American film. It does feel more like a straightforward murder mystery. It does have some stylish moments. It does have a good cast. I mean, here is mentioned Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif's on the back. He's not mentioned in the opening credits, which led me to a thought that I'll get to. Asia Argento is one of our leads. She was very young. I believe she was like 18. Actually, I'll check that. I'm pretty sure she was 18. But you get makeup effects by Tom Savini. So that's really cool. It's not really an effects film, but it's cool that he did it. Asia Argento, 75. So yeah, she was about 18. But also there's an appearance by Piper Laurie, who horror fans know her best as Margaret White, Carrie's mother. And it's another crazy mom role in this as well. It's kind of hard to explain this film because it does have, it really feels Argento gone American. It does feel almost feels more like a slasher. Like, it does feel more like an American slasher at times. I will say this is definitely when modern Argento is coming in, because there is some CGI in here. It's used stylishly, I will say that. The CGI is, not that it looks great, but it is done fairly well for what they were trying to do. The music was, of course it doesn't say on here, but of course, was done by Pino Donaggio, who I don't think I've ever seen that name before, but he did Tourist Trap, reviewed that. He did the original Piranha. He did Carrie. Okay. First of 8 collaborations with De Palma. All right. Oh, and he also did this film, which will be another movie that be in my video for films most commonly mislabeled Giallo. Don't Look Now, which I will be reviewing this at some point as well. I mean, it does have some Argento style, some neat things done with the camera. Most of it's limited to some dream sequences. Even Argento himself has said this is his most, maybe up to the time, but one of his more personal and most refined films. I was watching the making of, and yeah, he said this is the most refined Argento film that he's done. And I guess it's a pretty personal film because it's not about anorexia. Asia Argento's character happens to be anorexic. It does make a couple points about it, but it's not a major part of the plot unless you associate that to being part of her trauma that she has. But there's really just a couple scenes where it mentions it and where it shows her getting sick after eating. But he said, he had a niece or more than one nieces who did have anorexia, and it wasn't something that was being shown in films very often, so he wanted to do a film about it, or a film that really followed the traumatic life of a young girl with anorexia. And I would say this is an interesting way to do it because it's not about the disorder or anything like that. It just happens to be more or less through the eyes of someone that has it. So it's not really in your face anorexia, but there's enough about it so you can really sympathize with this girl and get what she's going through. This was based on an original story by Franco Ferrini, Giovanni Romoli, and Argento. And Argento produced and directed it. Written by Argento and T.E.D. Klein, or Ted Klein. I already said Tom Savini. And we get other appearances by Laura Johnson, James Russo, and Frederick Forrest. And our main lead is Christopher Rydell, who kind of certain times reminded me of the London twins. I know one is named Justin. I can't remember, or Jason. One was in Dazed Confused. The other one was in Mallrats. But basically, this movie's about, there's a guy who I think he's a cartoonist for this news company who he's driving down the road one day and he sees this young girl on a bridge. He thinks she's gonna jump. It's Asia Argento. I think he drops her off at home, and then that night, her mother, played by Piper Laurie, has this seance. And in the seance, she's talking about, I know who the killer is. Because the opening shot is the opening kill. Is this nurse. And I will say, the kills are pretty interesting. It's this device this like controlled device that has like this really strong fiber wire with the big loop, so when you hit the retract button, it tightens the loop. He puts it around their neck, and it's powerful enough that it just makes it cut their heads off. So that hits the news. There was already one victim prior, I think it said, so there's the opening death. The seance she's telling, there's also her husband, this guy with a neck brace who's the head doctor at this clinic, a couple other people. And, she's like channeling that she knows who the killer is. And then the killer appears, and Asia Argento runs out into the rain and sees someone in the dark holding up the head of her mother and her father. And so then the young guy, David, which actually in the beginning, before he drops her, he doesn't drop her off. He takes her out for lunch. She just up and leaves, and he realizes his wallet is gone. She calls him at work to give him his wallet back. And then he sees on the news that her family's been killed, so he offers to let her stay with him. And then there's the movie. They start putting everything together. And we find out it does have a nice build-up. I wouldn't really say it's a slow movie, but David he's trying to figure out what this girl's issue is. Like, he finds out that she's anorexic, like that's hinted, because he finds a bunch of food in the kitchen and he hears her getting sick. One of his buddies that he works with seems to be like an expert on mental illness. I thought there seemed to be one point where, because I guess he has some sort of relationship with the news anchor named Grace, and his friend pointed out something about sexual trauma, so I thought he was having sex with Grace, see if she walked in to see how she reacted. I don't think that was the case, because prior he was driving around, he was looking at all these prostitutes, I think to show that these women also might have anorexia, and he was trying to he spends a lot of the movie trying to learn more about her, which I thought, and this is in every man that is really trying to do the right thing. But he does end up having a relationship with Asia Argento. Her character's name is Aura. So we find out more about the killer. Like, the killer only strikes when it's raining, which I thought was interesting. All his victims have been decapitated with that device. There is this subplot where, for a while, I'm just kind of like, why are we seeing this? But it does make sense at the end. There's this young kid, like this young, blonde, bowl cut, big glasses kid, who has a thing for butterflies, and he notices it's him discovering that with very little words, the kid doesn't say much. It's all facial and physical acting. Like, he notices the killer's doing stuff up in this room that he can see through his bedroom window, and that, there's a head on a table, but it looks like it's looking at him. So throughout the film, we keep cutting back to him, and it's him looking more into the odd things going on at his neighbor's house. One of the first really, I guess, cool, stylish Argento things we see is after initially when David first goes to bring Aura to his house after her parents are killed. They go to her house. They're looking for something. I don't really remember what. But we do see that the killer does attack them and they have to leave. But it's this POV of the killer coming at the front door. And of course the music is like this like building up, and the camera is like as it comes closer to the door, it's like okay, that's kind of cool. We do get a couple things like that. The next time we see that young kid, I think this scene could have been more suspenseful had the music been different. He he's watching a butterfly, and it does show that the killer has these geckos. I think they're geckos. And this one eats this butterfly he's been looking at, and then it goes in the window. So he climbs through the window, he's looking around, he finds the device, but then the killer comes home, he has to hide. And the music just seems kind of too playful. And I know that's a big like juxtaposition that's happened a lot in Giallo. You have this whimsical or happy or playful or beautiful music put to something horrific. But I think this could have been a really good suspense builder. And I just thought the music was a bit too whimsical. He does catch the gecko or whatever, but I think he like got scared because he opens his hand and there's the yellow gunk, like he squeezed the guts out of it and he just drops it. That's how the killer realizes someone's been in his house. But things start picking, like David becomes more and more obsessed with trying to solve this case. It does have a touch of Crystal Plumage as far as David goes. Like, he does become really obsessed with trying to solve this case and to help Aura at the same time. I guess I'll get into spoilers because I can't really talk more about things I thought were gonna happen. But before that, I will say the ending did get me. I could see why some people might think the ending or the twist is a cheat or a cop-out. I see where they're coming from if that is the case. I thought it worked. You know, they were able to explain it and pull it off. I thought the motive for the killer, when it showed why the killer's doing what they're doing, I was just like, Jesus, Dario. I wasn't expecting it to go that far, but alright. It's different. But yeah, definitely once it kicks in and things really start happening, it is enough to keep your interest. It really does feel like Argento got American. It doesn't have a lot of the Italian charm and style that his earlier films did. Which, in a way, is kind of like The Card Player. The Card Player was like that. That felt like a procedural, like, NCIS episode. But this one had more style to it. And even though Brad Dourif's only in a couple scenes, he's great. He really is. So, I would add this to Argento's streak. Definitely part of his good run. I still don't know if it's his last good one or if Stendhal is good. I still need to get to that, but I thought Trauma was very solid. I liked the ending. I liked the twist. The motive was intense. I bought it. So yeah, if you can find it, definitely check it out. I got this off eBay, but so yeah, Dario Argento's Trauma. So now I'm gonna get into spoilers. So shortly after the scene where David and Grace are having sex, and then Aura walks in and then runs away, Grace calls the whatever clinic because she makes remarks about Aura, and David, defending her, says she's just a kid, she's suicidal. And you can tell Grace is doing it like out of spite. She calls and says there's a suicidal kid here. So they come and take her away. And then he has to get in and sneak her out. It is kind of a lengthy sequence, but there is some good suspense. This is where we see the guy with the neck brace who was at the seance, which I will say, he's kind of the main red herring. And I actually thought he was going to be the killer. I'm in spoilers now, so. But also, obviously, I knew Brad Dourif. I knew he was in this. He didn't have a credit in the opening credits, or at least I don't think he did. So even though this came out before 7, I thought it was going to be like a 7 type thing where he's not credited. Then you find out he's the killer. That's not the case either. But I really thought the neck brace doctor, Dr. Judd, because yeah, I did see that he's obviously pointing at him like a lot of Giallo will to make him obvious, but it made sense because as David is sneaking in through the clinic to get to Aura to break her out, the killer's also there, and we get the POV of the killer walking through the clinic, the hallways, goes in this one room where all the like lab coats are. So I thought it's got to be someone that works there or at least knows the inside of it. So I was thinking Dr. Judd. This one nurse who's trying to get a sedative into Aura, she gets killed because the killer will hit someone over the head to stun them, and then put the device around him, cuts her head off. And I think Aura sees the whole thing. David walks in at one point, which this other orderly, I think this other nurse orderly gets knocked out. Then he decapitates this blonde nurse in front of this one mental patient who's just like sitting there, and he's hitting the help button. But then at the end, he just waves to the killer with like a bloody hand because blood's flying everywhere. So I thought this was well done too, like the killer's POV, Aura being strapped in and sedated, David trying to find her. I thought that was a well put together sequence. But they find this picture with, then they're back at David's house, and there's a news report of the nurse that was killed. And I can't remember where they find it, but they find this picture that had that blonde nurse, and then the one from the very beginning, and then the one that we didn't see prior to the events of the film. There's all these nurses, and then this one doctor. And the doctor is Brad Dourif. So they go asking around if they can find Brad Dourif. Find out his name is Dr. Lloyd. He's now a drug dealer outside of a bar. And when, and of course David is in full crystal plumage mode. He just hops in his Jeep and goes wherever. Like, he's now fully obsessed. He mentions this woman's name. He gets all mad, like, get away from me. He does his Chucky scream, which whenever I see Brad Dourif, I wait for him to scream, and I'm like, there's Chucky. But there is a little bit of foreshadowing because David gives him his phone number, stuffs it in his pocket, and then that night, we see, which he found out it was Dr. Lloyd and where to find him because he goes to this other place. It might have even been the clinic. And someone says, oh, it's been a few years, but that's Dr. Lloyd, and yeah, he was the head doctor of all these nurses. So they start to put it together like, okay, it's this group of nurses, they're the target, only happens during like a raining thunderstorm. Dourif does get a pretty stylish kill, but there is CGI that doesn't look that great, but for what they're doing, it's pretty decent. And that is, he's wearing this gold chain. So when the killer has the thing around him, it catches his chain and it breaks. It malfunctions. So while still stunned, the killer goes over to the elevator that has like one of the draw door elevators, sticks his head through, and the elevator just comes down like a slow motion guillotine, pops his head off. But we see like Brad Dourif's head. We see everything in CGI, obviously green screen going by his head as he's like, but it's not even like he's falling towards the camera. It's like he's right in front of it, and then the green screen is showing the action of him falling. And it's like him still kind of alive and screaming, which we did kind of establish because during the clinic when people are getting decapitated, because I think he decapitates one other nurse now I think about it, they're still alive and like trying to talk. So we see people are still trying to communicate. They're still alive for a little bit after being decapitated. So then I was like, well, okay, they're not taking the 7 route and making Dourif the killer. But I still thought for sure that it was the doctor. Eventually, it all leads up to I'm trying to remember. Again, like I said, bear with me. It's been a few days, but Judd, the killer goes after Aura and David, and Aura runs off, but David gets in his Jeep. And there's an accident. And Dr. Judd crashes. And I think it had something to do with people, like they thought it was him. And they even found, when they looked at Brad Dourif's body, they found David's phone number, which does help tie into the end because he's going after them. And right when the cops show up, I'm guessing to arrest David, Dr. Judd's already there, but then he must think that they're going after him, so he runs off. Police go after him, as does David, but then there's like a roadblock. Judd hits it, dies. A head flies out of the car. They look in the trunk. There's all the heads. And, but when David gets back home, there's this note from Aura saying, I've gone to join my mother. I love you. He goes out in the lake nearby to look for her. He thinks she's committed suicide. So time's gone on. And again, I'm actually still thinking as Judd, I think there's still more to it because there's still plenty of minutes left. But eventually, no, you find out I don't remember how, but he does end up at the house next door to that blonde boy. And he finds that Aura is still alive. The killer is there. And the killer is Aura's mother. What happened was, well, first she knocks him out. Well, he finds this room. There's all these white sheets that say Nicholas. It's like a nursery. And I don't know if, I think there's like a rotted head in the crib, which I'll get to. He's chained up downstairs. Aura's down there. You get that she was probably abducted by the mother. Again, Piper Laurie is great in this. I mean, one of my favorite actresses, pretty much just based on Carrie alone. That's one of my top 3 favorite performances by an actress. But she pretty much explains what happened was she was going into labor with her son Nicholas. There's all the nurses. There's Dr. Lloyd. Which, that was another big thing that I forgot. No, the talking decapitated head was not at the clinic. It was, he was trying to get to this other victim that was identified in the photograph, this other nurse, which she put it together too. So she went to hide out at this hotel. Her girlfriend stayed behind. And then David found out where she was staying. And by the time he got to her, the killer already found her. And her head was left behind trying to talk to her. Which I think she said Lloyd as well. And then maybe that's where they found... No, that's not where they found the picture. It's hard for me to remember the placement of scenes, but... So, she was going into labor, and there's Dr. Lloyd, there's all the nurses, and a mixture of just clumsiness, a power outage, and, a crack of lightning. Brad Dourif, as Dr. Lloyd, has a scalpel, and he's delivering the baby, and when the power goes out and the lightning hits, he jumps, decapitates the fucking baby. When they said that, I was like, damn, Dario. I mean, you kind of, at that point, it's like, yeah, I'd be fucked up too. I probably want to go after some doctors. Not only that, the head nurse, which I think was the one that was in the hotel, suggested electroshock therapy. So they give that to Piper Laurie, hoping to fry her brains enough that she forgets the whole ordeal. Which that is hinted at because I think David's talking to, I want to say it was that one at one point, and they say we were getting away with some horrible things. We should have never got away with what we did. But we also see that the neighbor boy, this is how he finds out, because he thinks he sees Aura around, and he notices someone wearing her bracelet. It is a woman in a dark jacket. So he kind of follows her, but he falls behind. He sees the kid outside. He's like, did you see a woman with a dark coat and a bracelet? And he points to the house. That's how he gets it. And that's how we find out that the mother is still alive. So while she's telling all this down in the basement where David's chained up, we see the boy is upstairs in a closet. And then when she finally breaks through, because they had the chain so she couldn't get in, which was wrapped around a beam, so when she finally kicks the door open, it pulls the support beam out, and there's a hole in the floor, conveniently right where that closet is. And as she goes up to David and Aura, the boy slips over the device, catches her, decapitates her, and she dies. And then it's like your typical ending. They go off into the sunset. But yeah, I thought this was a very solid Argento film. I mean, you can definitely see where Argento will eventually end up, like with a card player type movie, which I think is a fair movie. Not his worst. But it's nowhere near as good as his films from the 80s. I can see why it hasn't stood the test of time as Tenebrae or Opera or even Phenomena of the 80s. But it's still, a really decent part of his filmography. And to really look at the first solo, big Argento film for American audiences, I think it's a pretty good movie. Yeah, the style is very minimal, and you have someone like Tom Savini on the special effects, but other than the decapitations and seeing, like, even though it's an old trick, just having someone, a hole in the floor, put their head through it, what they're doing looks fine, but it's not like it's not like, again, Tenebrae, when you get the hand cut off and it sprays all over the wall. Love that scene. But, even Argento is aware that this is more of a more refined, personal film. You can definitely see that. It does feel like it's lost some of its Italian charm, which I think was to be expected, but I think it's still a very solid film. Again, I could see how people might think the twist in the reveal is a bit of a cheat or a cop out. I thought it worked. Oh, how do you explain the heads the killer held up? Well, because Piper Laurie even points out that it was dark, it was raining, you were already in shock, that she held the father's head in her head like this, in such a position that she was able to just like run away into the woods. So, okay, simple little thing, but I thought it worked. Again, the motive was pretty extreme, decapitating a newborn baby, but yeah, I thought it was decent acting. Yeah, maybe Asia Argento, not as good of an actress as she'll become. I'll see how she is in Stendhal, because I think she's the lead in that as well. Not as good as his earlier films. It does feel more straightforward, more American. Maybe not the strongest twist, but it's still decent. It's not crappy Argento. Like it's not part of the plummet. It's not even really part of the decline. I think it's approaching the decline. But yeah, I thought Trauma was fairly solid. So I will be doing Double Face. I do have a couple more coming in, and I'll continue with the Argento films here and there, or do them all together, depending on time and when I get to these. But anyway, thank you for watching.